Well, in 1966, when Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale founded the Black Panther Party right here in Oakland, California, in October 1966, the party went from a local organization that was basically dealing with police brutality and white supremacy in the police force here in the Oakland and Bay Area, to a national organization that began to embrace the issues that affected black people globally. The Black Panther Party evolved into essentially a Pan-African nationalist organization in less than 2 years, and during the course of that evolution, the Black Panther Party reached out to revolutionary movements around the world, especially liberation movements in Africa, and in Cuba. The Black Panther Party established a delegation in Cuba. It was comprised mainly of Panther exiles who were being pursued by law enforcement in this country. Eldridge Cleaver, then the Minister of Information of the Black Panther Party, first went to Cuba and got political asylum. Because of the politics of the counterintelligence program and the attempts to turn black organizations against each other, Kwame Ture, or Stokely Carmichael, wound up traveling to Algeria, and initially for a Pan-African cultural festival. And it was through those relationships, those cultural relationships with other liberation movements, that we wound up establishing a consulate in North Africa and Algeria. Now, we need to understand that at the time that the Panther Party established this consulate in Algeria and Algiers was a hotbed of the liberation struggles of the world. There were representatives from every movement around the world: the NLF, the PFLP, the PLO.
And this is history that's been erased. Oh,
it's been erased by the same Negroes right now who are endorsing Israel. I was coming to that, but you leaped ahead of this. So at that time, when the Panther Party had established its consulate in Algiers, it was enjoying an immense amount of goodwill, and it established concrete relationships with the ANC, the PAC, the PAIGC, Frelimo, the Congolese Liberation Forces, the FLN, and as I stated over again, the Palestinians. And this led to an ongoing relationship. So in 68, myself in New York, I was one of the cadre, one of the Panthers who was in charge of the liaison with the Palestinian contingent at the United Nations here. The Panther Party had a concrete relationship with the Palestinian
Wait a second. Can
liberation
you just say
struggle.
this slowly, because now we need to hear this real clear. This is for all these folks that have been walking around saying, "How dare the Palestinians, blah, blah, blah," right? Can you repeat what you're just saying? Because we need to know this history.
Well, this relationship, that's what I was going to say, this relationship with the PLO, with the PFLP, you understand, this is when the United States did not recognize the PLO or the PFLP or the Palestinians as a legitimate liberation movements. They didn't recognize them. And the United States was involved in the war in Vietnam at that time. And if you recall, if you go back to the Black Panther Party newspapers, the old ones, you'll see that there were articles in there where our delegation had actually visited Beirut. And was taking on a tour of the Palestinian refugee camps. The Panthers offered to help the Palestinians in terms of political support and propaganda support. In fact, in Palestine, there arose the Black Panther movement in Palestine amongst the Palestinians who were emulating the Black Panther Party in the United States, because they felt that the PLO and the PFLP were not militant enough. Okay, and the same is true when we look at across the board at a lot of other movements. When we talk about the ANC in South Africa, when we talk about Tambo and Becky, these were all people who came through Algiers, who had residences in Algiers, who were meeting on a daily and a regular basis with the Panther Party. In fact, the Algerian government used to use the Black Panther Party's delegation in Algiers to meet and greet and host people from the African diaspora from Europe and the United States. The Panther delegation was one of the few movements in Algeria that could openly carry arms in the security in the security apparatus. So we've always had a relationship, an international relationship with liberation movements, and especially with, like I said, the Palestinians and with the North Koreans and with the NLF. If you go back to the old documents in the Panther paper, you'll see that the FBI was worried about how Huey Newton had offered to send troops, offered to send cadre to help fight with the NLF against the U.S. forces that were occupying South Vietnam at that time. And they were very concerned about that. They were very concerned about the interaction between the Black Panther Party and the Palestinian Front for the Liberation of Palestine under George Habash. So we've always had an international relationship with the liberation movements in Africa and in Asia and in the Middle East. And this always troubled the U.S. government, and especially troubled them when Martin Luther King came out and condemned the war in Vietnam and started to identify U.S. imperialism and U.S. actions abroad as the major purveyor of violence in the world. Now, you got to remember, there's a history here. It was the United States that overthrew the first democratically elected government in Iran that they're talking about now should be embargoed. It was the United States that sent the battleship Iowa off the coast of Lebanon and bombarded the Shuf Mountains in support of the phalangist attempt to neutralize Yasser Arafat and the PLO in Lebanon. They believed that Lebanon had become a Palestinian state. The Israelis invaded Lebanon in order to kick out the PLO. The PLO went in exile to where? They went in exile to Tunisia, to North Africa. Okay? So when we look at the destabilization of North Africa recently, Gaddafi, all of these incidents, all of these things have been connected in U.S. policy for years. We know that the same Negroes in Atlanta, they're sitting right down there now in Atlanta, who are silent on Zionism. Some of them Negroes were in the Carter administration, like Andrew Young, and were fired from their position because they sought reconciliation with the Palestinian people and the Palestinian issue. The Jews in AIPAC made sure that Carter fired his Secretary of State, which was Andrew Young at that time, for meeting secretly and without his authorization with PLO representatives. Okay? Right. So there's a history of African people in the United States supporting the rights of the Palestinians to self-determination and opposing the European settler state of Israel. And the United States government in its COINTELPRO operations saw that. They had a whole operation called Operation Jaime or something, some racist name, in which they sent letters around to to Jewish organizations saying that the Black Panther the Black Panthers were anti-Semites, they were Nazis, and that they were and that liberal Jews were supporting them. They blacklisted Leonard Bernstein, the head of the Philharmonic Orchestra in New York, because he held a support rally for the Panther 21 in his house.
And you were part of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we understand that the United States government has always carried out a policy to divide Black leaders in the Black community away from the struggles of people for self-determination and liberation, and especially Arab and Palestinian people. And it has become successful now because we have a Black leadership and a Black comprador class and Black elected officials whose whole format, entire funding, comes from the Israeli Zionist lobby and the right wing in America. So they don't represent Black people.